Well now, it has been a while, hasn't it? Regardless, no need for a big intro, you already know what it is. This is part 4 of the ultimate SNK fighting game Iceberg. Let's delve now into layer 4. Kicking things off, we have the hidden info in the Samurai Showdown 2019 beta. In Samurai Showdown 2019's rollback beta, it had been discovered that there was hidden information within the game via a debug menu. Through said menu, character hitboxes and frame data would be displayed. When a patch to improve the game's rollback netcode finally rolled out, players discovered that the debug menu was still accessible. Unfortunately, this feature would quickly be patched out not long afterward. This debug menu was seen as a goldmine for players who built upon or utilized sites like Mizumi, which helps players further level up their game and familiarize themselves with the character's frame data, and so on. The debug menu still remains patched out despite many players pleading for its return. Strikers have existed since KOF 94. This entry is referring to a team assist bug that somewhat mimics the function of strikers that can be found in some early KOF games. In some of these games, the point character's teammates appear in the background. While this is more for just aesthetics and the characters do not directly intervene with matches, it turns out there's actually a bug that enables them to do just that. This team assist bug will cause one of your teammates to leap in from the background to intervene on behalf of the fighter currently in the fight. It seems like this bug only works when the fighter in the match is at low health or is stunned. Apparently this bug can be triggered in the mainline KOFs from 94 up to 98, up until the striker system officially debuted in 99. Yuki's original KOF 94 plans. Although her first and only playable appearance in a fighting game came in the year 2000 with SNK Gals Fighters, and her official introduction was in KOF 97, Yuki's first ever appearance in the KOF series was actually in the very first KOF game, 94. In the Japan team stage, she can be seen in the background. This was confirmed in an interview with SNK developers that was published in Volume 7 of the All About series back in December 25th of 1994. The SNK devs went on to reveal that there were plans for Yuki to have a special sequence in which she would show up whenever Kyo gets KO'd. 3-count bout. Also known as Fire Suplex in Japan, 3-Count Bout is a 1993 wrestling game released by SNK. It is centered around the SNK Wrestling Federation, or the SWF, hosting the World Indiscriminate Class Tournament, which is an open-weight wrestling tournament held to crown a true world champion. There are 10 playable wrestlers, most of whom are based on real-life wrestlers. The gameplay has been described as a mishmash of elements from wrestling games and traditional fighting games. 3-Count Bout has both traditional wrestling matches and even street fights / hardcore matches, the latter taking place outside the ring and allowing wrestlers to use weapons. While 3-Count Bout never got a sequel, some of the characters live on through cameos in other SNK games, with Terry Rogers and Master Barnes being seen in the Hyper Galaxy Ring stage in KOF 15. The Red Dragon is arguably the character with the most appearances and mentions outside of 3-Count Bout, being a support character in the Rhythm of Fighters, getting a mention in KOF 13, and appearing on a poster advertising a match between him and Sylvie Paula Paula in SNK Heroines Tag Team Frenzy. 3-Count Bout even has a link with the SNK fighting game Savage Reign. While he didn't appear nor was playable in 3-Count Bout, the character Max Eagle wrestled for the SNK Wrestling Federation. Shingo's girlfriend. In Shingo's KOF 2000 bio, it is revealed that Shingo has a girlfriend, as she is listed amongst his prized possessions. The identity of his girlfriend has never been revealed, although some point the finger at cosplayer Kyoko, as she is another striker for Shingo in the game. Maki boss fight in KOF 96. This is yet another instance of KOF characters' existence being established before they officially debuted. If you play the Sacred Treasure Trio in the KOF 96 arcade mode, you'll stumble into the sub-boss, Chizuru Kagura. Before and after the fight, there are cutscenes that basically point to this Chizuru actually being her twin sister, Maki Kagura. Maki wouldn't make her full debut until KOF 2003, fighting alongside her sister Chizuru, who crafted a copy of her while she was under the control of those from the past, Botan. Mai's hidden super in KOF 2002 UM. KOF 2002 UM Mai Shiranui is my recent favorite incarnation of Mai. Some of you may already know why, but for those who don't, it's because of this move. I miss it so much. I'd love to talk more about it, but it isn't the focus of this entry here. Mai has an extra version of her signature super deadly ninja bees in which she changes into a bikini before then performing the move. In addition to that, the super is invincible from start to finish and can even OTG or hit opponents when they are on the ground. The catch here is that there is no manual way to trigger this version of the super. Instead, it all comes down to random chance, as this version of the super deadly ninja bees has a 1 in 16 chance of occurring. Original KOF 94 Mexico team. The KOF 94 Mexico team, also known as the Art of Fighting team, actually went through 2 changes during development. Before SNK settled on the team comp of Ryo Sakazaki, Takuma Sakazaki, and Robert Garcia, they originally had Yuri on the team alongside Ryo and Robert. Of course, Yuri would end up joining Mai and King to form the Women Fighters team. So who was the first character that was considered as Ryo and Robert's partner? That would be Li Pai Long, as shown here in this concept image. Task over. Task over is a message that pops up on KOF games whenever a player overwhelms the game. Usually triggered by something along the lines of a complex combo, such an action will screw up the CPU and cause the game to freeze. The Monkeys in Hokkaido. This entry is referring to the Hokkaido stage in the original Samurai Showdown, which is part of a series of stages centered around Kamui Kotan, the hometown of Nakoruru and Rimururu. Hokkaido is a real place, being Japan's second largest island and the northernmost of the country's main islands. As far as nature is concerned, Hokkaido is known for its ski areas, volcanoes, and onsen, or hot springs. One look at the Hokkaido stage and this particular area looks like it could be near a skiing area. You also may notice various animals all around the area, including, quite unusually, monkeys. In an interview with Polygon, Samsho background designer Tomoki Fukui recalled some fans pointing out monkeys in the Hokkaido stage and remarking that there are actually no monkeys in the real-life Hokkaido. When asked why they were there, Fukui explained that Nakoruru is so beloved by nature that even non-native animals followed her home. If you ask me, this was a pretty clever cover. The original Sokaku. Sokaku Mochizuki is one of SNK's most unique and underrated characters. His playable appearances have been limited to just the Fatal Fury series, as he's only made cameos in KOF and some other games. His most recent mention actually comes courtesy of the upcoming Fatal Fury City of the Wolves, as he tipped off Mai Shiranui about an unspecified thing in Southtown. This is actually quite significant, as it seemingly signals that the former rivaling Mochizuki and Shiranui clans have improved relations. The original plans for Sokaku had him looking and being quite different all around. In the beginning, he wasn't a monk and didn't have any of his unique powers. So what was he? A young karate practitioner. That's it. SNK then scrapped this concept as they wanted a character with more oomph and impact. Thus, the magical monk Sokaku was born. SNK didn't immediately happen upon the design we all know of, as there were some early designs that also ended up getting scrapped. Athena VTuber. Ever since the breakout of figures like Kazuna Ai in 2016, VTubers have been continuously more and more popular as the years have gone on. SNK decided to jump in on the trend and create a VTuber Athena. Given Athena's design and charm, she pretty much fit the trend seamlessly. Debuting in 2018, the Athena VTuber was created as part of a marketing tactic to help promote the mobile game KOF All-Star. She's voiced by Haruna Ikezawa, who has voiced her in roughly all of her appearances since KOF 98. KOF 12 and 13 English dub. In the data of KOF 12 and 13, there were hidden files of an English dub for the playable cast. These files would first be unearthed from KOF 12 and then also be reused for KOF 13. With 13 having some additional characters like Mai, Kula, and Psyche, there were newer recordings. But according to Lord BBH on YouTube, these recordings seem to only be exclusive to the data of the KOF 13 arcade port. Despite this, KOF 13 did not have an option to change voices to English. Lord BBH also has a video going through all of the KOF 13 English dub audio files, if you're interested. KOF Chronicle. This was a Japan-exclusive free-to-play mobile game released on October 17, 2019. It was a KOF-themed tower defense RPG game which would have special events featuring side quests and new adventures called Episode of Fighters. These events would give the player free playable units with extra special moves and techniques. Original plans were for the playable roster to feature characters from every KOF game up to KOF 14. Unfortunately, the roster only got up as far as the Nest Saga. Ash Saga characters were inbound, but KOF Chronicle will be shut down October 15, 2020, ultimately resulting in said characters getting cancelled. Osamu. Osamu is a scrapped KOF character that was planned to be a boss character in 94 and 95. He's a young boy dressed in a hooded robe and has been suggested to be a proto-Chris, not me. Osamu resembles Chris, not me, even more in his 95 concept sketch, just in his Heavenly King's attire, which we would see him wear as recently as KOF 15. Scrapped Real Bout hidden character. In a 1995 interview with the developers of Real Bout Fatal Fury, it had been revealed that the game had two scrapped characters. One of them was a new character that ultimately ended up getting scrapped due to Billy's growing popularity. The other was a hidden boss character that got scrapped, as SNK didn't quite like the idea of having another boss fight following the fight with Keith Howard. King Chest Damage. In the data files of the Neo Geo version of Art of Fighting, unused graphics can be found suggesting that it had originally been planned for King to have battle damage to her shirt, exposing her chest mid-match. I couldn't really find any reason why this was scrapped, but I'm sure most of us could probably guess. KOF 14 frame data code. Roughly a year into KOF 14's run, it had been discovered that there was a secret code in the game to reveal frame data. The code would only be activated on the main menu, and quite interestingly, the code was the famous or infamous, depending on your taste, pretzel input for the Raging Storm. When performed correctly, the screen will flash and a voice will be heard. I personally think it sounds like Antonov. The code reveals frame data for the game, but not the frame data most mistakenly thought it was at first. Rather than displaying frame data for specific characters, the data was actually displaying how long a particular button was pressed. KOF 2001 rejected artwork. After lead character illustrator Shinkido was laid off from SNK due to the company's 2001 bankruptcy, Nona, who had been working for SNK since 1995, was selected to be his successor. His style was quite a contrast from Shinkido's, placing a lot of emphasis on light and shadow, making for a darker anime-inspired look for many of the characters. KOF 2001 was his first game after succeeding Shinkido, and there's quite a number of rejected pieces of character art. The differences between the rejected images and the official ones involve many things such as different poses, different expressions, different details, and more. Come KOF 2002, Nona was apparently asked to make his art more like KOF 94, meaning he would have to simplify his style. Come KOF 2003, Nona was unable to lead character designs due to being too busy at the time, which led to Falcon stepping up in his stead. Nicotine Caffeine name origin. Of all the Samurai Shodown characters, Nicotine Caffeine arguably has the most bizarre name in the series. He even has a nephew that bears the Caffeine surname. Nicotine Caffeine doesn't seem to use either of these substances in his name, so where did it come from? At the time of the game's development, the game's director Yasushi Adachi was hooked on coffee and cigarettes at the time. As a bonus fact, the substance-based name puns with Nicotine Caffeine even extended to the temple that he is the chief priest of, which is called Cocaine. Do you get it? Kuroko's real name. More Samurai Shodown name-based trivia, huh? Kuroko is one of the more enigmatic characters in the series given all the mystery surrounding him. One of the notable mysteries surrounding him is his actual name. People familiar with traditional Japanese theater may easily recognize the inspiration of his design, as Kuroko are stagehands in the background dressed in all black. They assist with costume and scene changes and even handle props usually in the form of animals. The all-black attire is meant to symbolize that they are not active characters in the scene and are invisible, possibly as a means to bring more attention to the props they sometimes handle, which are part of the show. SNK kinda played with the mystery surrounding Kuroko's real name. In Sam Show 2, when his name is listed in the credits, it's distorted and hidden with pixelation. In 2005, on the English version of the official Samurai Showdown website, which contains profiles and information for the game up to Samurai Showdown 5 Special, you can find Kuroko's profile on the Sam Show 2 page. There, he is referred to as Dual Judge Slick Tsukihiro. The Band of Fighters. The Band of Fighters are a character image band consisting of Nakoruru on keyboards, Terry Bogard on drums, Iori Yagami on bass, Kyo Kusanagi on guitar, and Athena as the lead vocalist. The band isn't canon to the main KOF storyline, but instead are part of another timeline where singing and performing songs solves most of their problems. The Band of Fighters would also collaborate with guests who were other KOF characters. The Band of Fighters even appeared at Neo Geo World as animatronics performing their songs. Many people may remember the Band of Fighters making a cameo in Shermie's SNK Heroines Tag Team Frenzy ending. Shermie and CYS were performing in a battle against them, and Orochi was seen in the crowd as an Athena fan, wearing and holding some of her merch, causing Shermie to wake up from her sleep. Eiichi Kisaragi the Luchador. This entry is exactly what it says, and it describes the early design idea for Eiichi Kisaragi in his AOF2 debut. I mean, if you look in Lucha Libre, you can find some luchadores that utilize a similar ninja-like aesthetic to Eiichi, so I could personally see it. In these sketches, Eiichi seems to have the same, if not a similar outfit. It's his masks that are different, with this one having an opening where his mouth is visible, and this one that covers more of his face. KOF Dance Tracks. KOF Dance Tracks is a 10-track remix album released by the SNK Sound Team on November 21st, 1996. As the album title suggests, all of the tracks are original KOF songs that are remixed and reworked into dance songs. The first and second version of Arashi no Saxophone were remixed for 2 different tracks on this album. Other notable KOF tracks that were remixed include Asaka and Trash Head. You can find the album on YouTube and even buy a physical copy on Amazon or eBay. Given how obscure this album is, it could very well be considered a collector's item. Real-life backgrounds and stages. It's widely known that video games will sometimes take direct inspiration from many things in real life. In the case of things like locations and stages, it's even less of a surprise that some games will directly adopt them into their games. SNK did this quite extensively with their fighting games, as you can see with the many examples shown here. Though they and other companies still incorporate real-life stages into their fighting games today, I can confidently say that this was definitely more of a common practice with more old-school fighting games. Athena Fourth Wall Break. In the original Japanese version of KOF 94, Athena has a win quote aimed at the England team in which she calls herself the first SNK heroine. Healthy reminder that the England team in 94 are who we now know as the women fighters team today. The aforementioned statement from Athena isn't even really a boast, but an actual fact, as she did make her overall video game debut before all 3 members of the OG women fighters team. This was also one of the rare instances of an SNK character name-dropping SNK within a game. Double Dragon. While it wasn't the first ever beat-em-up game, Technos Japan's Double Dragon is one of the most influential franchises within the genre. It inspired the creation of other acclaimed beat-em-ups such as Golden Axe and Final Fight. Like the aforementioned beat-em-ups, Double Dragon also threw its hat into the fighting game market. The first such game was Double Dragon 5 The Shadow Falls, released in 1994, which Technos Japan apparently had minuscule involvement in. The second Double Dragon fighting game, which Technos Japan was quite involved with, is our focus here, as it was published for SNK's Neo Geo AES and Neo Geo CD consoles in 1995. This game was based on the Double Dragon film from 1994, which of course was inspired by the debut Double Dragon game released in 1987. The game goes as far as to include scenes from said movie in its intro. Unlike many fighting games, Double Dragon doesn't have distinct punch and kick buttons for normals. Instead, the attacks are simply referred to as attacks, with there being light, medium, heavy, and strong or super attacks. While there aren't distinct punch and kick buttons in the context of the controls, you will see a mixture of the two in terms of the characters' arsenals. Another unique thing with this game is the merging of the health and super meter, the latter being called the charge meter. The remaining health is in yellow, lost health is in red, and the charge meter is in blue. When the word charge flashes under the character's bar, you can perform charge moves, which in essence are supers. The word charge will appear when the blue meter matches the character's remaining health, meaning that the lower their remaining health is, the quicker they have access to their charge move. This would be the final Double Dragon game released by Technos Japan, as they would go out of business shortly afterward and have their IPs purchased by the licensing company Million. In June 2015, Technos Japan's IPs were purchased from Million by Arc System Works, who are the current owners to this day. Waku Waku 7. Waku Waku 7 is a 1996 fighting game developed by Sunsoft. Like the aforementioned Double Dragon 1995 fighting game, this game was published for SNK's Neo Geo AES system shortly after it hit the arcades. Waku Waku 7 is one of the weirdest yet resplendent fighting games ever created. Its lively, colorful characters complement the game's crazy cartoonish combat. Waku Waku 7 has to be one of the earliest fighting games to heavily utilize parody from the characters to its very storyline. The plot is centered around 7 characters looking for the 7 Waku Waku balls, which will grant the wish of the person who is able to collect them all. Yeah, I'm sure you get it. Each of the 7 key characters are associated with a Waku Waku ball of a specific color. And speaking of characters, roughly each one is a parody or a nod to some other character or character archetype. Arena, my favorite, has been considered a parody of the half-animal, half-human characters often seen in anime. Some have even likened her to the character Rumi from Galaxy Fight Universal Warriors, another Sunsoft fighting game that preceded Waku Waku 7. Rai has been compared to and considered a parody of Kenso. While I do see something of a resemblance, what additionally sells me on this is the fact that both of them struggled to get the girl. Some other very obvious character parodies and nods are Dandy J being a mishmash of Indiana Jones and Joseph Joestar, Marudu parodying Totoro whilst fighting like the Sasquatch in Darkstalkers, and Bonus-kun parodying Ryo. It's also worth noting that Bonus-kun is a Galaxy Fight original, which makes him a guest character in Waku Waku 7. He and the final boss Fernandez, or Fernandez if you prefer, are only selectable in versus mode. Speaking of Fernandez, whose whole boss battle basically parodies the kaiju genre, he takes the SNK boss syndrome to a strange place as he hits you with some of the goofiest, most insulting moves that a final boss has ever done. Of the many fighting games considered cult classics and or hidden gems, Waku Waku 7 is arguably one of the most beloved. Knives Out collab. Researching this was actually kind of funny. Knives Out is a 2017 Chinese multiplayer battle royale game developed by NetEase Games. It was initially released for Windows, iOS, and Android, and will be released for the Nintendo Switch and PS4 in Japan in 2019. It's a third-person shooter inspired by the likes of PUBG. As is the case with some other games in the battle royale genre, Knives Out had several collaborations, one of which was with KOF. More specifically, Knives Out had a KOF 98UM themed collaboration, which featured the inclusion of Terry, Mai, Kyo, Iori, and Athena. The funny thing about researching this was that I had searched Knives Out SNK, and lo and behold, this game also has a collaboration with Shingeki no Kyojin, aka Attack on Titan. The good old SNK mix-up. You gotta love it. Kyo and Athena. For this one, I want to give special thanks to Helsik. Initially, I was simply going to say that I'm aware that Kyo and Athena are one of the more popular KOF ships, if I'm even right about that, but I really didn't feel qualified to talk much about this, and even after researching, I didn't feel like I had much to say. Then as I was continuing to search, I stumbled into some of her videos, and from that I was given a bit more context. So in addition to the whole Kyo-Athena ship basically being something along the lines of fanfiction, this was actually kinda played up in the KOF Kyo game. There are a couple of scenes where the two of them interact, like one where Athena wants to go out with Kyo, and another where Kyo asks Athena out on a date after finding her at an arcade. Both scenes also involve a predictably jealous and irate Kenso. The KOF drama CDs from 96 up to 99 even show Athena having basically a one-sided crush on Kyo. With all that being said, if you look at their interactions in the mainframe games past the aforementioned games and adaptations, Athena is shown to be in more of a platonic friendship with not just Kyo, but his girlfriend Yuki. I've seen some people claim that the adaptation shouldn't be considered canon, and I've also seen those who suggest that this is just a sign that the romantic feelings between the two just faded away over time. I personally don't have an opinion on this, but I can say it was definitely an interesting little dive. Again, thanks Helsik. Terry was a baseball mascot. In what is personally one of my favorite pictures of Terry, this is a 1995 promotional picture by SNK for the Japanese baseball team, the Orix Blue Wave. The same year, in 1995, the Orix Blue Wave won the Pacific League pennant, being led by future Hall of Famer Ichiro Suzuki. They would not only win the pennant again in '96, but also the Japan Series. In 2005, the Orix Blue Wave would be merged with the Osaka Kintetsu Buffaloes to form the now present-day Orix Buffaloes. Scrapped SNK character for Capcom Fighting All-Stars. Capcom Fighting All-Stars Code Holder is a cancelled 3D fighting game. Originally, Capcom was working on a third entry in the Capcom vs SNK series. This ended up getting scrapped due to SNK facing bankruptcy around that time. Capcom then repurposed elements and assets from what was meant to be the now much sought after CVS3 and used them to make Capcom Fighting All-Stars. Unfortunately, that game ended up getting scrapped around 2003 due to a negative reception from fans who got the opportunity to test the arcade version. The planned roster for Capcom Fighting All-Stars consisted of original characters, various Capcom characters, and a guest character from KOF. This image here is a silhouette of the character in question. From what I can tell, most sources and people point to this being Kyo or K-Dash. It's worth noting that in the article where Toyohisa Tanabe is being interviewed that also includes this image, Tanabe mentions that they cannot say the character's name. Instead, when the mystery character is mentioned, there are 3 asterisks, possibly suggesting Kyo was mentioned. However, when looking at the silhouette, I personally think it's K-Dash, mostly because of the hair. Between K-Dash and Kyo, it's the former that has been shown to have more spiky hair. Plus, that pose seems more K-Dash than Kyo in my opinion at least. Neither character has made a guest appearance in a major fighting game at the time of recording, but one day, I hope that changes. KOF World. KOF World is a mobile 3D MMORPG that was first released in 2017. Over 30 established KOF characters appear in the game, as well as a few original characters. The game presents lots of the KOF story, whilst having the player engage in plenty of battles and puzzle solving. Interestingly, there is another MMORPG of a similar name that was made for the Chinese market. This game would have the player create an avatar and have them fight with moves adopted from KOF characters. The idea was to create a game with a mishmash of the traditional fighting game and MMORPG experience, while also looking to delve into and expand the KOF story. Unfortunately, this game would end up getting cancelled. KOF Volleyball. While some people know about the volleyball game that people can play in KOF fighting games with Athena, there is an actual KOF volleyball game. It's a KOF spin-off in the form of a mobile sports game. In the game, you select 2 of the 8 KOF characters to play as a duo in volleyball matches. When you win 4 matches, you will then encounter the host of this volleyball version of the KOF tournament, Rugal. When you beat him, pressing the pound key or the hashtag as some may know it as nowadays, will allow you to play as the hidden Rugal. This is yet another Japan exclusive KOF game, hence why many may not know about it. Although there are emulators out there, from what I've seen, the ones that are out there are pretty clunky. Darlie Dagger's birthplace. So there is a bit of mystery surrounding Darlie Dagger's background. For one, her birthday is listed as August 8th, despite the fact that isn't the day she was born, far as we know, but instead it was the day that she was found. Additionally, her birthplace is also unknown and is speculated to be, quote, somewhere in the sea. This all does seem to track as Darlie was found washed ashore at a young age. So, could she have been born at sea? And if she was, why was she there? Who was she with before she had been washed ashore? SNK has seemingly thrown out some hints about Darlie's country of origin, and they all seem to point at Madagascar. For one, Darlie's default color scheme also matches that of the flag of Madagascar. Speaking of, in this concept art image of Darlie Dagger, the flag of Madagascar can be seen. Then there's her weapon, Libertalia, which for those of you who are folklore nerds may recognize as the same name of an alleged legendary pirate colony discovered in 17th century Madagascar. Finally, there's this stage that ultimately didn't make it into the game, which was located on the shores of Madagascar. This was meant to be Darlie's stage. However, it is worth remembering that this stage is more than likely where she was found, as she was raised by carpenters there. Ergo, this isn't a confirmation of her being born there. There's even an interesting theory by this Redditor suggesting that Darlie may be of Ethiopian descent. Personally, I think there's a strong enough case and enough pointed hints to suggest she's from Madagascar. Regardless, I do like the way SNK plays with the mystery. Aggressors of Dark Combat. Aggressors of Dark Combat is a fighting game developed by ADK that was released in 1994 for the arcades and the Neo Geo. This fighting game had a couple of elements that made it atypical to others in the genre around that time. Take the UI for example. One of the instantly noticeable things is the lack of names on the health bars. Also, rather than multiple rounds, Aggressors of Dark Combat matches were only one round long, with the characters having multi-layered health bars which would go from being blue to green to yellow to red. The movement and perspective of Aggressors of Dark Combat may remind some players of beat-em-ups. Additionally, nearby weapons can be picked up and used as well. The playable roster consists of 8 characters, one of which is a guest character, Kotaru Fuma from ADK's other fighting game, World Heroes. Joe Kusanagi, no relation to Kyo or his family, is the main character, a cocky delinquent looking for strong street fighters. The game's other most notable character is Kisara Westfield, who I'd personally argue is the star of the game. Not only is she the sole playable female character in the game, but she's the only Aggressors of Dark Combat original that made a playable appearance in another fighting game. That of course being Neo Geo Battle Coliseum. Characters like Joe Kusanagi and Bobby Nelson were only relegated to cameos and smaller appearances. Aggressors of Dark Combat wasn't warmly received by critics upon its release, with many claiming it wasn't nearly as impressive as other fighting games currently on the market. Its most notable accolade came from Electronic Gaming Monthly, who named it the quote, strangest fighting game of 1994. I'm pretty sure there were some other games out there at the time stranger than this one. Despite this, there are fans that still look favorably upon this game as a cult classic. KOF Awaken. KOF Awaken is an unreleased and possibly cancelled CGI film that had been originally set for a 2022 release. It was produced by the Chinese studios Joy Pictures, Original Force, and iDragon Creative Studios. The story seemingly takes elements from KOF 96 with the inclusion of Genetz, who is confronted by Kyo as the former was attempting to steal a sacred treasure from the temple the latter was protecting. After the release of the 2020 trailer, there weren't any news or updates released in regards to KOF Awaken, which has led to most fans believing that the project had been abandoned. Gongil Darkside Phil comparisons. Well, if you didn't already see it or think about it beforehand, then I am so sorry for implanting that in your mind. The entry is pretty much another one where it's basically what it says. There have been fans that have compared Kim's master Gongil to the infamous YouTuber Darkside Phil. If by chance you don't know who that is, first of all, God bless you. Second of all, if you're curious, there are plenty of videos out there explaining DSP, and I'll leave the rest to you. The funny thing about this is that I didn't know DSP had ever played KOF 14 until I started researching for this entry. There's even a video out there of him trying Gongil's trials. From what I can tell, DSP hasn't acknowledged the comparison, but he did call Gongil a quote weirdo in the title of a video where he fought a Gongil player online that got him a bit tilted. Despite his reputation, believe it or not, DSP actually bested the Gongil player before then getting eliminated by a Zarina player. SVC Chaos scrapped characters. On September 19, 2017, SNK artist Falcoon tweeted artwork he did of Devil May Cry main protagonist, Dante. Accompanying this image was a caption in which Falcoon claimed that Dante had been considered for the SVC Chaos roster. Another character that was seemingly considered for the game but didn't make the cut is King. Unused sprites of Ryo Sakazaki were found in the data of the Neo Geo version of SVC Chaos. One of said sets of unused sprites is where Ryo looks away from his opponent with a somewhat bashful, embarrassed expression on his face while scratching his head. This mirrors his KOF 2001 special intro that he has with King, which possibly suggests that there were at least plans for her to be in the game at some point in time. Athena: Awakening from the Ordinary Life. Athena: Awakening from the Ordinary Life is a 1999 sci-fi horror adventure game that was developed by Yume Kobo, who also developed the King of Fighters Kyo. Of course, the game is centered around Athena Asamiya and takes place in the year 2018. Around this time, science has advanced to the point where things that were considered unrealistic could very well be made into a reality. In the midst of these occurrences, which can basically be chalked up to shady government dealings and conspiracies, Athena gradually comes to the realization that she is far from normal as she discovers she has psychic powers. As you can probably tell from some of the in-game imagery and even promotional material, this game has much darker overtones compared to other Psycho Soldier games. It even got a shout out in KOF 99 with the museum stage. It is the site of Athena's battle with a T-Rex, hence why you see a skeleton of the dinosaur in the back as well. Neo Geo Battle Coliseum Story is a satire of SNK's Eolith days. Neo Geo Battle Coliseum is a 2005 crossover fighting game with a playable roster consisting of original characters and characters from a variety of SNK and ADK franchises, the latter SNK purchased the trademark and rights to after ADK went defunct in 2003. As is the case with most crossover fighting games, there's usually little to no story involved. Neo Geo Battle Coliseum's plot, on the other hand, is fairly straightforward. The story is centered around Neo Geo World and this evil faction looking to dismantle, rebuild, and take it over. This evil faction, known as the Wares Conglomerate, decides to then host a tournament called Neo Geo Battle Coliseum. The two main protagonists, Yuki and Ai, who are the best agents in the federal government, are dispatched and sent to enter the tournament in order to save Neo Geo land. Those that are quite knowledgeable about computing may have caught something familiar in that little summary. The Wares Conglomerate is named after Wares, which is a general computing term for piracy. The president of the Wares Conglomerate is this guy, Goodman, who is basically a copy of Ignis, one of the most powerful bosses under the Eolith umbrella. Then there's Mizuchi, who is just an Orochi clone. Not just in terms of design, but also storyline. Mizuchi's sprites were actually crafted from Orochi Chris's HSDM, wherein he transforms into Orochi. SNK threw in these satirical elements into the story as they blamed piracy for their 2001 bankruptcy. Part-Time Stories: Kyo and Iori. This is a webcomic series that kicked off on September 13th, 2017 with Falcon as the author. The webcomic could be seen as SNK celebrating the grand opening of their online shop. The story is even centered around Kyo and Iori's adventures as co-workers in an alternate timeline. Kyo is already employed by the shop, while Iori is looking to save up for a bass guitar. The series even features other SNK characters as secondary characters and cameos. At one point, Kyo brings in Shingo to cover his shift. Even Yashido becomes an employee at one point. The store is run by Intagirl, who served as a mascot for the SNK Entertainment subdivision of the company. The webcomic is actually pretty funny and is worth checking out if you haven't already. Hidden West Albuquerque. In Fatal Fury Special, there is an alternate version of the West Albuquerque stage. The Mount Rushmore-esque rock formation in the background replaces the faces of US presidents with those of the final boss Wolfgang Krauser and his three defenders, Billy, Axel Hawk, and Lawrence Blood, all of whom are sub-bosses. This version of the stage is only accessible through hacking the game. Interestingly, the alternate version of this rock formation can be seen in Terry's Fatal Fury City of the Wolves stage, except rather than Axel Hawk, the face on the far right side appears to be a faded, less chiseled sculpture of geese. The Oddities of B. Jenny's Ennui Mademoiselle. B. Jenny's Ennui Mademoiselle is easily one of the most memorable supers in SNK fighting games. B. Jenny gets heated to the point where she takes off her heel and proceeds to decimate the opponent with it. Unlike in Garo Mark of the Wolves, her bare foot isn't visible when doing the move in KOF 15. Even if you pull some camera tricks and zoomed farther out, you'll see that she still has her shoe on while doing the attack. The move even has a slightly weird occurrence in KOF Maximum Impact 2. When performed by B. Jenny whilst in her G or H costume, her boot will become segmented when she takes it off to attack the opponent. With this occurrence, it's safe to say that this was more than likely a matter of graphical limitations rather than a glitch or a bug. Galford and Earthquake are Mexican. This is a theory that digs a bit deeper into the two inaugural playable American characters in the Samurai Spirits franchise. The birthplaces of Galford and Earthquake are noted as what we now know as present-day California and Texas, respectively. The Samurai Spirits timeline starts in the year 1786 and goes all the way until 1811. Even before I mention that very information, I'm pretty sure you already knew that around that time, neither California nor Texas officially had been granted statehood. Instead, both would be part of the Viceroyalty of New Spain, or simply New Spain, which had been established during Spain's colonization of the Americas. New Spain would be dissolved in 1821 as a result of the Mexican War of Independence, which then led to the establishment of the Mexican Empire. I'm not exactly sure if that makes the two of them Mexican, however, I can be sure of this. I love it when fighting games of all things cause me to get a history lesson. The original Maxima. The most top-tier hardcore SNK fans may remember another Maxima that appeared in one of their games long before KOF 99. Robo Army is a 1991 beat-em-up game that takes place in a futuristic setting. The two protagonists were in a near-fatal accident and were later made into cyborgs. These two characters are named Maxima and Rocky. Maxima is the player 1 character, whilst Rocky is the player 2 character. The Robo Army Maxima and KOF Maxima are separate people and aren't related in any way whatsoever. However, there is something of a link between the two. Rocky, as some of you may remember, actually made a playable appearance in a KOF game, that being KOF 2000. Here he was a striker for Maxima, the KOF Maxima to be clear. However, there's yet another twist. Similar to the two Maximas, the two Rockies are also different people. KOF Maxima had a, quote, comrade in arms named Rocky that had been killed in a Nest-related incident. These coincidences could very well have been done by design when you consider that SNK had plans to include a Robo Army team in KOF 99. Ultimately, this didn't happen, and instead, SNK went with the idea of including KOF Maxima's partner Rocky as his striker as something of a tribute to Robo Army instead. Unused KOF 96 moves. This was a bit difficult to find much information on, but from what I could tell, there's apparently a KOF 96 hack out there called KOF 96 Evolution. This ROM hack contained numerous supers that were scrapped from KOF 96. Some of these supers looked unfinished and potentially broken if you ask me. Seeing that this was during a point in time where SNK was putting out a new KOF every year, I could definitely get why some of these looked unpolished. KOF originally wasn't going to be a fighting game. Many have likely heard that KOF originally wasn't going to be a fighting game in the beginning. Instead, it was planned to be a side-scrolling beat-em-up. At that time, SNK had looked at a game like Capcom's Final Fight and wanted to create a game within the same vein. However, SNK wanted to make a beat-em-up game that involved gameplay centered around trios and team-based combat rather than a single character. Most know this original proto-KOF game as Survivor. In the KOF Ultimate History book, the lead planner of the game, Toyohisa Tanabe, revealed that there was another title for the game that even preceded Survivor, that being Dirty Knuckle. Gamist accidentally predicts SNK Capcom crossover. Gamist was a Japanese magazine that focused on covering arcade games. The magazine was strongly involved in covering the fighting game boom of the 90s. The story goes that when Gamist published this issue, it apparently caused some confusion and uproar among fans. This was due to the portion of the cover talking about the King of Fighters versus Street Fighter. While this was referring specifically to KOF 98 and Street Fighter Alpha 3 being released around the same time, many fans allegedly mistook this as an announcement for a crossover game between the KOF and Street Fighter franchises. It was the hype from fans over this misunderstanding that allegedly further encouraged Capcom and SNK to release some crossover games together. The following year, in 1999, two crossover games between the two companies would be released: SNK vs. Capcom Card Fighter Clash and SNK vs. Capcom The Match of the Millennium. If this KOF vs. Street Fighter mix-up from fans encouraged Capcom and SNK to cross over, then it makes for a pretty interesting origin story for these crossovers. If this did not play a factor in encouraging these companies to make crossovers, one could look at it as a prediction that came true or just a funny coincidence. Regardless, the undeniable fact is that these crossover games did indeed happen, and they all have their admirers. Ranmaru. Not to be confused with the Ninja Master sub-boss of the same name, the Ranmaru we're focused on here is, well, this character, who I'm pretty sure at first glance you definitely confused her for someone else. Ranmaru hails from an obscure 1993 fighting game called Battlemaster Kyūkyoku no Senshitachi, or Battlemaster The Ultimate Warriors, which was developed by System Vision. Again, one glance at Ranmaru and your mind more than likely instantly thought of Mai. It is worth noting that Fatal Fury 2, Mai's debut, came out an entire year before Battlemaster did. Ranmaru's comparisons to Mai seemingly start and stop at appearance, as their fighting styles are drastically different. Still, many will look at Ranmaru as nothing more than a Mai knockoff. I mean, given that Mai was super popular upon her debut, some imitations and copycats popping up a year later isn't the most far-fetched of occurrences. K-Prime. K-Prime is basically just another interpretation of K-Dash's name. In the fields of mathematics, science, computing, and more, the dash, as we call it, is referred to as the prime symbol. Do you get it? As a little bit of added extra trivia, the prime symbol and the apostrophe are not the same. Same thing also applies to the double prime symbol and the quotation mark. However, the usage of the apostrophe and quotation mark in place of the prime symbols is accepted in some aspects, due to said characters not being on the average keyboard, just as long as it's not in a formal context or setting. In early English promotional material for his KOF 99 debut, K- was referred to as K-Prime. Here's an instance of it on some KOF 99 packaging, and here it is on a KOF 99 manual. Some fans contribute the K-Prime translation to a person who had some significant knowledge in one of the fields of study mentioned earlier. The reason why Angel hates gambling. If you've ever looked at Angel's personal profiles, you'll know that she abhors gambling. This was inspired by a real-life gamble, or a bet, if you will, involving a KOF 98 match. The story goes that the head of Evoga, Angel Torres, was challenged to a KOF 98 match by the SNK staff. This was en route to the release of KOF 2001. Evoga were a group of Mexican game developers that, around that time, were approached by the company Brezasoft with an offer to help develop their fighting game, Rage of the Dragons. The KOF 98 match came with a wager. If Torres won the match, Evoga could have an all-original character created for the upcoming KOF 2001. If he lost, then the KOF staff would have created a character to be included in Rage of the Dragons. There is even $5,000 on the line between the betting parties as well. Torres would emerge the winner and would later be called over to the KOF team while working on KOF 2001. He will be shown a bunch of character designs and was allowed to pick whichever one he wanted. It didn't take long for him to make a decision. In addition to selecting the character, he requested that the character be Mexican and named after himself. And that's how we got Angel. Seeing that Angel's creation came about because of a gamble, the fact that she dislikes gambling could additionally be seen as a rib on the whole situation. And speaking of Rage of the Dragons, Rage of the Dragons. This is a tag team fighting game that was originally published by the then company Playmore in 2002. In addition to the aforementioned Brezasoft and Evoga, the game was additionally developed and designed by Noise Factory. Rage of the Dragons was originally conceptualized as a sequel to the 1995 Double Dragon fighting game. This didn't come to fruition as Evoga couldn't get the rights to the Double Dragon characters. There are 14 characters on the playable roster, and you can choose to either play one of the default team pairings or play with a custom team pairing. 4 of the game's characters, Jimmy Lewis, Lynn Baker, Elias Patrick, and Mr. Jones, would go on to be hidden guests in the Neo Geo version of Power Instinct Matra Melee, another fighting game produced by Noise Factory. On November 14th, 2024, roughly 2 decades after its initial release, Qbyte Interactive would port the game to the Nintendo Switch, PS4 and 5, Xbox One and Xbox Series, and Microsoft Windows, giving many more players the opportunity to delve into this hidden fighting gem. Takeshi and Mika. So, for me personally, researching this was kind of funny because I instantly thought about two of the four main characters from the 2008 freeware horror game Ao Oni. For the record, I have yet to play the actual game, I've only watched the anime adaptation and the movie. Anyways, we're obviously not talking about that franchise. The Takeshi and Mika mentioned here are the main characters / personalities of Neo Chupi, an SNK radio program that ran from 1997 to 2000. Takeshi was portrayed by Keiko Kamitani, who also voiced Rimururu in the Samurai Spirit 64 series, Warrior's Rage, and Nakoruru ADV. Mika was voiced by Harumi Akoma, who has also voiced many other SNK characters, most notably in this case, Rimururu's sister, Nakoruru. They were featured in Neo Chupi's crossover with the SNK-based radio drama station Neo Geo DJ Station. The crossover was called Neo Geo DJ Station in Neo Chupi. They even made a hidden cameo in KOF 98 in the Japan stage under very specific conditions, which YouTube user O5Pro lists here. Geese Howard Gaiden. Finding information about Geese Howard Gaiden online was admittedly quite difficult, but what I do know is that this is a 2-volume manga adaptation by Etsuya Amagishi, with one volume being titled The Geese Howard Story, and the sequel being titled Geese in the Dark. From what I can tell, the manga follows the story of a young Geese Howard rising to the ranks of being the mob boss that we know him as today. If you've read this manga by chance, feel free to correct me or provide more information in the comments. I'd love to hear more about it. KOF 2000 alternate strikers are canon. While the striker system was not a thing in the Ash saga, there was an interesting development concerning the system in a game from said saga. In KOF 2000, Chin's alternate, or another striker if you prefer, was Baitong, a panda bear that had been befriended by Bao. This is humorously ironic given that one of Chin's noted dislikes is panda bears. In KOF 11, Baitong actually got a mention and something of a cameo despite Chin's absence from this game's iteration of the Psycho Soldier team. In their ending, Kenso dedicates his fight to Baitong, and Athena tells Momoko about the time he fought alongside them as their striker, directly referencing KOF 2000. It's also worth noting that KOF 2000 was also Baitong's overall game debut, a distinction he shares with other KOF 2000 alternate strikers, cosplayer Kyoko, Candy Diamond, and Foxy. All other alternate and Maniac strikers were either alternate versions of established characters or characters from other SNK franchises. The KOF character that became official. The character in question here is Ganiko, who was designed after the Midnight Bliss transformation of Genitz in SVC Chaos. She would be created and initially made playable in appearances in Mugen. As Ganiko grew more and more popular on the internet to the point of becoming something of a meme, SNK took notice. The first instance of her making an appearance in an official SNK licensed game is in the 2006 KOF Pachislot game. While the aforementioned is more of a minor reference, it will be KOF 98 UM Online where she would make her playable debut in an official SNK licensed game. At the time of recording, her final appearance in an official SNK game was in KOF All-Star under the name Lady Genitz. Despite all this, she has yet to make a canon appearance in any SNK game. Vice is a cannibal. In KOF 2002 UM, Vice has an HSDM in which she walks forward with this hunch, looking cadaverous or possessed or something. When she is hit, she laughs out loud, tosses the opponent onto the ground behind her, dashes to, and then mounts the opponent, and then the lights go out. In the darkness, blood splatters and flies around to the sound of chomping noises, and then the lights come back on. If you couldn't already tell, this HSDM all but confirms that Vice was biting chunks off the opponent. If you look closely at this move, when she dashes over and mounts the opponent, her face is literally inches from the opponent's body. If you ask me, when the lights come back on and she's standing over the opponent's body, it looks like she's wiping her mouth at one point. Given that all of Vice's violent munching was obscured by darkness, seeing we weren't gonna get mutilation on the level of Samsho or Mortal Kombat in a teen-rated game, it's further proof that she was doing something unsavory, and cannibalizing someone fits the bill. Also, this HSDM is called Cannibal Corpse, of all things. Cannibal Corpse is an American death metal band who are known for embracing bloodthirsty, macabre imagery in their lyrics, as well as their merchandise and album covers, which have resulted in them getting banned from performing in certain countries. Wendy Chu. Karen Yu is a Chinese-American wrestler currently wrestling for WWE, where she performs on the NXT developmental brand as Wendy Chu. The reason why she's on the Iceberg is that in 2022, she assumed a gimmick which saw her dressing up in pajamas, carrying around a pillow, and being an immense slacker. Even during matches, she would fall asleep, which would throw off opponents, and even inadvertently dodge attacks by stretching and yawning. To KOF fans, this may sound quite familiar, as it sounds like Maiden-kun. I couldn't find anything suggesting Wendy Chu is a KOF fan, or if she or someone in the backstage staff was inspired by Maiden-kun, but there have been fans that have likened this gimmick to the sleepy-headed secret weapon. Blue Demon in KOF 2001. Continuing with the KOF professional wrestling connections, Blue Demon was a legendary Mexican luchador and actor. He, alongside longtime in-ring rival El Santo and Mil Máscaras, are considered the big three of lucha libre, as their impact on this style of wrestling is undisputed and unparalleled. Blue Demon's likeness has appeared in KOF 2001 twice. One is in this artwork of Ramon, who can be seen holding Blue Demon's mask. This is rather interesting considering Blue Demon never lost his mask in a match, and just like his in-ring rival El Santo, he was buried wearing his mask after his death in the year 2000. Blue Demon's other appearance was in KOF 2001's Las Vegas stage. Apparently, Blue Demon had been involved with KOF 2001's development in some form or capacity, and the usage of his likeness in the game was done as a form of gratitude to him from SNK. Yuki Seiyu auditions. SNK held open auditions for a seiyuu for Kyo's girlfriend, Yuki, on June 15, 1997. They were looking to find her a voice for planned drama CDs and, of course, KOF 97, where she was planned to have made a cameo. This audition drew approximately 1,534 women who participated. Things get all the more interesting when you consider that apparently 400 of them were fans of the KOF series, and even 16 of them shared the name Yuki. Other members of the KOF voice cast were even at the event as a means of working with the participants. As cool as it would have been, none of the participants named Yuki seized the role. Instead, Tomoko Kojima would be chosen. After her 97 debut, she would go on to voice Yuki in the aforementioned radio programs Neo Chupi and Neo Geo DJ Station. Quiz King of Fighters. Quiz King of Fighters is a 1995 Japan-exclusive quiz game developed by Saurus and published by SNK. Despite King of Fighters being in the title, KOF originals like Kyo and Iori are nowhere to be seen. Instead, the playable characters all hail from Fatal Fury, Art of Fighting, and Samurai Showdown. The same goes for characters that make cameos or pop up to issue trivia challenges. Quiz King of Fighters plays like a board game. You roll the dice and move around to spaces that can trigger a variety of events, such as a head-to-head contest between two players to be the first to input a command displayed on the screen, and more commonly, trivia challenges. The latter usually involves the appearance of a character who issues the challenge, whom you can only damage by answering trivia questions correctly. The categories of questions range from politics, geography, entertainment, and even SNK-related trivia. The game actually has a storyline. It's set in Quiz City and involves Yuri Sakazaki getting kidnapped by this guy, who then somehow transforms into this thing, which is the final boss. The 7 playable characters have their own personal reasons for entering Quiz City, some of which are actually shared amongst a few of them. Ryo, Mai, and Robert are all looking to save Yuri, with the latter looking to additionally impress her. Terry is looking for a trivia challenge, Haomaru sees Quiz City as a step on his journey to greatness, and finally, Nakoruru apparently senses evil spirits and forces in the city. Shinkido Victory Art in KOF 96. Toshiaki Mori, better known as Shinkido, is one of the most esteemed illustrators amongst SNK fans, Capcom fans, and beyond. His blend of anime influence mixed in with realism continues to be celebrated even to this day. This entry focuses on what is possibly one of his more little-known contributions to KOF. Shinkido was the artist who did the KOF 96 victory screen artwork. It's been suggested that some of the more unusual elements of the artwork, most notably some of the more odd-looking faces, came about because they had to be finished quickly due to time constraints. Your mileage may vary on what you think still holds up well and what might look cursed, but it's still interesting to look at nonetheless. The Breakers series. Breakers is a 1996 fighting game released for the Neo Geo and developed by Visco. In 1993, the game was announced with the title Tenren no Shio Shikamamaru in Japan and Crystal Legacy outside of Japan. It's yet another one of those obscure 90s fighters that really didn't make much of a splash upon its release, yet has gained a cult following as time went on. Many saw the game as a mishmash of Street Fighter II inspired visual and character designs and Fatal Fury style gameplay. There is one unique mechanic which involves the defending player using a move to cancel out of being in block or hit stun. These moves are called breakers, and the act of doing so is called breakering. In terms of the plot, Breakers involves your standard fighting game storyline centered around a tournament called the Fighting Instinct Tournament, or Fist, being run by a madman, more specifically a man being possessed by an evil spirit. One unique thing about this game is that in the occurrence of a mirror match, a character will face off against a clone character. While these clones fight just like the character, they will go by a different name, most of which were the names of the characters in the early Crystal Legacy version of Breakers. These clone characters even have their own unique backstories. Breakers would get an update roughly 2 years later called Breakers Revenge, which added a new character named Saizo, made the final boss Huang Baihu playable via a code, gameplay balance, and tweaks to the game's visuals and UI. The original Breakers and Breakers Revenge will be packaged into a collection called the Breakers Collection, which was released in 2023. In 2024, another update to the game called Breakers Revenge Chicago would be released exclusively for Japanese arcades. This version, balanced by Who, introduced 3 selectable playstyles for each character, included enhanced graphics, and more. Also, main protagonist Sho Kamui would appear as a playable guest character in the indie fighting game Pocket Bravery, which will be released in 2023. His stage in the game is the same one from Breakers, but with cameos from the Breakers cast. Colorful Pow Pow Cafe. You've seen the KOF 94 Pow Pow Cafe, right? A big lively crowd in the back immensely enjoying some drinks and grub while getting into the action in the foreground. While it's obvious there are prototype versions of stages, the 94 Pow Pow Cafe is a bit of an interesting case. The early version of the Pow Pow Cafe seen here is clearly more resplendent and lively in terms of the colors. On the back of the KOF 94 Neo Geo CD box, it is the colorful Proto Pow Pow Cafe that is shown, despite the fact it is this version that is actually in the game. 66 bow designs. For me, this was quite an eye-opener. I'm not really all that crazy about bow, so I never knew this until researching for this video. Like all of, if not many characters, there were quite a number of visual design concepts for bow. However, there were apparently over 66 such designs for the dragon-spirited youth. There are sprite concepts of him in a variety of different orange and white outfits. Then there are these sprites where he's wearing a different outfit with a different color scheme and even has a different hairstyle. Bao also looks a bit taller in some of these sprites, at least in my opinion. It gets even crazier when you look at some of these early concept sketches. Again, some of them do resemble the Bao we know now, but then there are also those where it seems like Bao is a girl. Also, and arguably the most unusual ones in my opinion at least, are the more mature Bao designs. Yeah. I would have never guessed that these were concepts for Bao of all characters. The original reason for Samurai Showdown's high damage. According to a 2017 Polygon interview with Samurai Showdown creator Yasushi Adachi, he wanted the game to instill the fear and risk of fighting with weapons in players, thus explaining the simple big hits in Sam Show doing such insane amounts of damage. SNK management was apparently not all that supportive of this design. Adachi ultimately ignored management and kept the high damage intact. He would later admit in an interview that he felt like such a design choice was controversial and wouldn't really fly nowadays. Healthy reminder that this interview was in 2017. He pointed out that dev teams have to consider the findings and reports of market research, which suggested that games with inconsistent and unbalanced damage distribution wouldn't really get over. Your mileage may vary on whether or not such a design choice is good, bad, or controversial, but there is no doubt it further helped Samurai Showdown stand out among other fighters. Cell-shaded Raiden. En route to KOF 15's release, this image started to circulate amongst SNK fans. It shows a designer working on an image of Fatal Fury's Raiden done in a cel-shaded style. The image actually originates from SNK's website in a section that highlighted members of the SNK staff. More specifically, the image would be found on the page highlighting designer Tomohiro Nakata, who is pictured here. This image caused some fans to speculate that Raiden would make a playable return in KOF 15, which unfortunately did not happen. Even with the most recent SNK fighting game coming out at the time of recording, Fatal Fury City of the Wolves, he's currently been relegated to a background cameo in T-Zoc stage. KOF Sky Stage. This is a 2010 KOF themed Danmaku, or bullet hell shoot 'em up game. You control one of 6 characters who has been blessed by Chizuru with the ability to fly. With these powers combined with their own abilities, they battle wraiths and demons as they look to rescue fighters imprisoned by Orochi. Characters can shoot, bomb, and use their ultimates, the latter's potency being determined by how many energy bars you have stored, with the maximum amount being 3. Bombs can attack a large area of enemies and can be utilized as the player finds them. There are other notable SNK characters that appear in the backgrounds whom you must shoot down to obtain invitations. Only through collecting these invitations can you access the second batch of stages. The game is notable for being the last SNK game to have full-on English voice acting for the characters until, of course, Fatal Fury City of the Wolves came around. KOF Sky Stage even got something of a sequel with Neo Geo Heroes Ultimate Shooting. Gustav Munchausen. Gustav Munchausen is one of the lesser-known KOF tournament hosts. This is due to the fact that 1. He is from the KOF EX series, which has largely been ignored by SNK in the past couple years, and 2. He only appeared in one game in this alternate timeline, KOF EX2 Howling Blood. Gustav is a power-hungry European millionaire who sought to revive Genitz. To achieve this, he kidnaps Shinobu Amo, the younger brother of KOF EX newcomer Miyu Kudasaki. Gustav hosted the KOF tournament as a means of testing Shinobu's power. When his personal weapon ended up getting defeated in the tournament, the European millionaire mysteriously vanished. Jin Doji Wang. Also known as King of Combat and the King of Dazzling Fighters, Jin Doji Wang was a fighting game developed by Jade Studios and published by Tencent. The game never saw an official full-on release and instead spent its entire run in beta, the first of which was released in 2011 via digital download from Chinese servers. Around the time of the beta's release, the video game console ban that China had enacted in the year 2000 was still very much in effect. With KOF being popular in China and PCs being really the main option to play video games, Jin Doji Wang was basically created to give Chinese players their own KOF game to play. The game takes a great amount of influence from KOF in terms of gameplay and character designs, the latter of which will definitely look very familiar to fans. Despite the game basically being something of a KOF mockbuster, SNK actually partnered with Tencent, allowing Terry Bogard and Benimaru Nikaido to appear in the game as playable guest characters. In 2015, both SNK guests would be removed from the game due to a restructuring plan enacted by Tencent, which dismantled Jade Studios. There were plans to bring Terry and Benimaru back to the game, but this unfortunately never happened. In 2019, Jin Doji Wang's official website went down and it was removed from Tencent's game store. Even those with the launch file cannot access the game, as this is one of those instances where a game needs an internet connection to even function. The servers are also down, hence this game is pretty much lost media. The striker system almost returned in KOF 2002. In the Neo Geo port of KOF 2002, unused moves for playable characters can be found in the game's data. In the case of Kyo and Clark, the unused moves are striker animations. As I'm sure you know, KOF 2002 was the first NES Saga game in which the striker system was discarded. So with these animations being found in the data, this could possibly suggest that KOF 2002 almost retained the striker system. Fatal Fury Y2K bug. Also known as the Millennium Bug or the Y2K bug, or just simply Y2K, this was an alleged computer glitch that would, quote, destroy the world come January 1st of the year 2000. It would involve several computer programs and systems being unable to count above the year 1999, resulting in said programs and systems going back to the year 1900 rather than the year 2000. The game Fatal Fury was also affected by this bug, as when you defeat Geese, the date of his death is displayed as the date the player completed the arcade run. However, the year of the date is always sometime during the 1900s. For example, if you were to complete the game today, it would claim that Geese died in the year 1925. In an interesting twist though, the original Japanese release of Fatal Fury is not affected by the Y2K bug. The Samurai Gumi. The Samurai Gumi are the original development team of Samurai Showdown / Samurai Spirits. According to Sam Show director Yasushi Adachi, the original Samurai Gumi consisted of 20 people, but later grew to about 50. The team was known for its obscurity, with the general public knowing very little about them. This was quite atypical for a time where most other dev teams would be more willing to engage in interviews. Adachi did disclose some interesting information about the Samurai Gumi in a 2017 interview with Polygon. For one, he claimed that the Samurai Gumi could have possibly been the first dev team to have an official website, which actually still exists to this day. The Samurai Gumi were also apparently big fans of and were influenced by Madhouse, the Japanese animation studio known for producing many anime TV shows, OVAs, and films. Adachi specifically notes Ninja Scroll in the interview, but as a side note, they've also worked on some of my personal favorites, including Perfect Blue, Black Lagoon, and my all-time favorite anime, Yu Yu Hakusho. Adachi also stated that the Samurai Gumi still remain friends to this day, keep in touch, and desire to make a new Sam show. Of course, a new Sam show would come out roughly 2 years after this interview. Takuma's Attacker. In the KOF 2003 Art of Fighting Team ending, Takuma is assaulted by someone whilst being alone in the dojo reading a newspaper about the AOF team's KOF tournament victory. There's really nothing blatant or subtle hinting at the identity of Takuma's attacker. The only solid piece of information one can draw from this ending is that Takuma knows the person, which apparently caused some people to point the finger at Yamazaki or Eiji Kisaragi. Before Takuma could say much more to the AOF team, he passed out and was taken away in an ambulance. Things get even more weird with this angle, as SNK basically retconned the whole thing in KOF 11, claiming Takuma collapsed due to malnutrition and various other health issues, leaving the original assailant angle as an unsolved mystery, or an abandoned arc, if you will. KOF team edits almost debuted earlier. KOF 95 was the first KOF game to allow players to mix and match characters to form their own unique teams, otherwise known as team edits, whereas the previous and inaugural KOF game, 94, only allowed the player to select the established trios as they were. According to Masanori Kuwasashi, who served as director of KOF 94 and 95, the team edit feature was originally planned and ready to be implemented in KOF 94. Kuwasashi recalled pitching the team edit idea to producer Takashi Nishiyama, who made the call to reserve it for KOF 95. He further stated that, quote, "We held back the team edit feature in KOF 94 in order to establish the team idea for the player to grasp with the characters in the game, so I think it was the right decision to make." Designer Toyohisa Tanabe felt that the change to the team edits allowed players to have more freedom of choice, even though it totally diminished the charm of pre-made teams. He additionally felt that team edits potentially posed challenges for game balance, but ultimately felt it was better for the game. Personally, I can't speak for everyone and I'm not going to, but I'm confident more players would prefer having the team edits. Let me know what you think in the comments. Taoto and Ellie Jones. Taoto and Ellie Jones are proto-characters that were conceptualized for the first Fatal Fury game. Both would be redesigned and made into established characters later down the line. Taoto would become Huajai, while Ellie Jones would become Duck King. There are other early concepts of other Fatal Fury characters, such as this image of Tung Fu Ru, who was originally said to be younger than he would later be presented, but it's this pair of characters that not only went through visual design changes, but also name changes. Eiichi Kisaragi inspired an artist's alias. Jean Mera is a freelance illustrator, instructor, and comic book artist that was hired by SNK in late 1992. While she's best known for her work on Samurai Showdown, she's also done promotional artwork for games such as KOF, AOF, and Metal Slug. AOF 2 was one of her favorite SNK games, and from said game she came up with her alias, Shiroi Eiichi. She came up with this alias, naming it after Eiichi Kisaragi and a white alternate color palette that the character had in the game. Initially, the alias led to many believing she was a male illustrator until revealing her identity later down the line. Chongpaifu Theories. Zhong Baifu is a character from Savage Reign that has appeared in both of the games in the series. Alongside Tongfu Ru, he appears to be another SNK character visually inspired by Master Roshi from Dragon Ball. There are seemingly a few interesting theories surrounding Zhong Baifu, both of which stem from his hat, which he claims was given to him by, quote, the legendary wolf. I think we all know who that is. For those that may not know, the setting of the Savage Reign series is in the 21st century in a city called Jipang City, which was formerly known as Southtown. Ergo, this hints at Zhong Baifu crossing paths with Terry Bogard. However, there is another interpretation of this. Some speculate that the legendary wolf Zhong mentioned could be Rock Howard. Given the time frame of Savage Reign, Rock could have been the last notable legendary wolf, inheriting that title from Terry. It's also worth noting that Terry did give Rock a blue hat in his Real Bout Fatal Fury ending. Could this be the hat that Zhong Baifu wears? There is an alternate theory suggesting that Zhong Baifu is an elderly Rock Howard. Again, Terry gave him the hat, and quite some time has passed between Garo Mark of the Wolves and Savage Reign. However, this theory is seen as more of a joke than anything. What do you think? I think the numbers don't line up all that well with this one. Warrior Angels. Also known as Sanlu Nuja, Warrior Angels is a 2018 fantasy action comedy movie released in China. The movie follows Qiao Fen, a woman with uncontrollable powers who was attacked by an assailant and seeks to avenge her father. She would take the form of a red-clad woman who utilizes pyrokinesis. One glance at the red-clad Qiao Fen and yeah, you see it, don't you? These scenes of her using her powers and the focus on her breasts doesn't really help it much either. A court in Beijing clearly agreed, as they ruled that the movie infringed on SNK's copyright. In addition to Mai, there are some other characters in this movie that have been compared to KOF characters, such as a beardless Chang, Choi, a dime store Benimaru, and a dark-haired mature who is the main antagonist. The Beijing court awarded the equivalent of $111,500 in damages to SNK China. The ruling was apparently being repealed, but unfortunately I was unable to find any further information on the matter. As always, if you by chance know what happened in this case, do not hesitate to share below. Joe Higashi's smile. According to an interview with KOF 94 devs, Joe had initially been given a win pose where he would make a large toothy grin with many teeth missing. In consideration of Joe Higashi fans, the staff scrapped this idea as they found his grin, quote, sad and too scary. Make him hot. These were the directions from sponsors given to the KOF 2001 staff in regards to Ignis. The reception to the previous boss character Zero was reportedly lackluster, and they were looking to make a drastic improvement with the next boss character. SNK noted the high standards for, quote, handsome characters in fighting games for Asian fans, and the tendency for said fans to usually dismiss ugly joke characters. When it came to Ignis, SNK were apparently told to make him hot hundreds of times by the sponsors, and in SNK's eyes, the final iteration of the new KOF boss turned out to be a, quote, real stud. Fatal Fury prequel with Geese Howard as protagonist. From what I can tell, this entry stems from this unused Geese Howard promotional artwork by Shinkido. Many people have claimed or theorized that this is artwork for an unreleased Fatal Fury prequel game that had the villainous Geese in the role of the protagonist. As cool as this sounds, it has seemingly been debunked by some eagle-eyed fans. There are some images showing the promotional artwork in a book with a caption below that suggests that this illustration was actually made for a Fatal Fury novel or short story, following the early days of Geese Howard and Jubei Yamada, who is more than likely pictured here in the image. There's been some discussion over the identities of some of the other characters pictured, with some claiming to see Joe Higashi's father, Terry Bogard, Andy Bogard, a young Tongfu Ru, and possibly a younger Mr. Big. The nun in the back has been subject to several theories ranging from Geese's mother, a lover, or some other original character. Unfortunately, it seems that this project never saw the light of day, and it probably never will. Alrighty, and that was Layer 4 and 5 of the ultimate SNK fighting game Iceberg. I apologize again for this one taking so long to come out. It almost seems like I'm just releasing these like yearly almost. But I can guarantee you before this year is over, I am going to try to finally finish the ultimate SNK fighting game Iceberg. I know I've got a lot of other icebergs planned, some that you know about and some that you don't, but that's beside the point. What I will say with this is that the next video in this series is going to be the final one. I know there's like 4 or 5 layers left in this iceberg, but I promise you the next video will be the finale of the ultimate SNK fighting game Iceberg. Like, compared to a couple of the layers above, these last couple ones are actually not that dense, they're actually kind of thin. So we will finish this iceberg with the next video in this series. Again, thank you all for being patient with me, I hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, of course, I am the Chris Lotus, signing off. You all take care of yourselves, be safe out there, be cool to each other, and stay cool by staying hydrated. See ya.